stop. Your bob could be so much better. Here's 5 ways how. Okay, I get it, that was aggressive. But stick with me here. After doing hair professionally for almost 30 years, I've seen a lot of bob shapes, and I've also seen a lot of mistakes. And that's how I know that these 5 things that I'm about to share with you could be the difference in your bob looking good on you or looking absolutely incredible on you. Look, at the end of the day, we all want that showstopper, right? We want people to stop you on the street and be like, oh my, look at you. Well, this is gonna get you there. I'm about to share. You ready? Oh, and I also know that after all of these, the first question you're gonna have is, great, well, who do we see to get this done? Or how do we find the right stylist? That's the question I get all the time. I'm actually gonna share someone with you, somebody that I've recently discovered, and they are absolutely amazing at bobs. Might be around your area. Okay, the first big mistake that I see or big concern is just having too much angle, meaning that the front is way too much longer than the back. Now, I know that if you've been around the channel, so you've watched me, I've done a lot of info about bobs and I talk constantly about how you should have some angle. Your bob should basically follow your jawline. So now I'm telling you that's too much or you shouldn't have angle. What's the deal? No, what I'm saying is that angle is good. However, too much angle is a problem. It's because the angle doesn't actually start in the back of the neck. It actually starts right at the back of the ears. So everything from the back of the middle of the neck all the way to the back of the ears is basically straight. And then your angle starts right there and starts to get longer going down towards the front. So if there's too much of a difference between how short the back is and how long the front is, that angle is gonna be too severe and it's gonna end up looking like these kind of dog ears or things that just kind of hang there that don't really make sense. That shape isn't gonna grow out well, it's not gonna swing well, and it's just not gonna be as flattering. Now, at the same time, straight across where it parallels the floor, meaning that it's technically the same length in the back as it is in the front, that's also not as flattering, and that's typically because most people don't look at you like this, right? They're looking at you at some sort of version of your profile. So what's happening here is really important. And if this is longer in the back or the same length, it's gonna look like it's longer in the back and it's gonna bring the eye down to this that feels like it kind of drags there, and that's not lifting the eye. If we wanna talk about being more flattering, then we generally wanna talk about being more uplifted and lifting the eye up in that process. And that is done by having a little bit more of an angle, and that kind of follows the lines in the face. So a little bit of angle, flattering. Too much of an angle, kind of awkward, I'm not gonna lie. And that takes us right into our next mistake, which is just that the length isn't right for your face shape. So here's what I see happen all the time. It's really easy to go into a stylist with a photo that you saw either online or in a magazine and tell them, I love this bob. It looks great on the person, you think it would be amazing, you're ready to rock it. Now the problem though is if that stylist doesn't really understand bobs, then they might not realize that length might not work as well for your face shape as it could. Let's take, for instance, the idea that you saw a photo of somebody with a longer face shape and that bob set right at their chin. But then you feel like you've got a little bit more of a full face, maybe it's a little bit more round, or maybe you have a shorter forehead. Well, then that length landing right at your chin like the photo does is gonna add a lot more fullness to your face, and it might make you feel like now your face is even more full and it's really not working for you. Whereas on the person in the photo, because their face was longer, that same length actually added that same amount of fullness to their face, but it was okay because their face could use a little bit more of that fullness to offset the length. Basically, you're gonna fall into one of two categories. Either your face is feeling a little bit too full, it's round like we talked about before, or you've got more fullness in your cheeks, or you've got a smaller forehead. In that scenario, we just wanna keep that bob length a little bit longer than the chin. And that length being longer than the chin is gonna help us offset some of that fullness in the face. Flip side, if you feel like your face is a little bit too long and you would like to add a little bit more fullness to it, well then you want that bob to land in at about your chin because again, it's going to add that fullness. Okay, number 3, and if I'm honest, I should have used this as number 1 because this is probably the thing I see the most often and it's the most challenging. And that is that it's just too layered right over the ear. It ends up looking very thin down there, and realistically, it takes away from the whole look of a bob. Now, there are bobs that don't have a very strong line, and they're purposefully cut that way, and that can be a very cool look. But for most people, if you think of a bob, you're thinking of a pretty strong line. How do you deal with this concern? Well, the real way is you find a good stylist that understands bob. And I told you I'm gonna introduce you to somebody that's amazing with that. But if you can't find somebody that is incredible with bob shapes, what you could do is just express to your stylist before cutting it that you're very concerned about this right around the ear looking too thin. I've had a bob cut before and it just felt like it was really too thin there. Is there any way that we can ensure that this stays thick? You can kind of talk to them in that way, and if they understand technical hair cutting, then they're gonna likely understand why it feels too thin and then hopefully not do that. Now, if you can't, oh my God, let me introduce you to somebody that is amazing. I saw his work a while back. My wife introduced me to him. And if you live around the Houston area, do not walk, run to Chris Jones. I'm gonna leave all of his contact information for you where you can find him in the description. He is amazing. Now, let me back this up and preface this with, I grew up around very strong stylists, and I was able to work and learn from some of the best stylists around, some of the biggest names in hair. My bar for what is good is very high, and I pride myself on bobs because I recognize that bob shapes are exceptionally hard to do well. And if you can do a good bob, you can do anything. Chris, I'm telling you, is a masterclass. There is so much that I can learn from him. And in fact, number 5 in this list, I'm gonna share exactly something that I learned from him, and it's amazing. Okay, before we get to number 5, which is gonna be a huge tip. Number 4 is that you're just scared of layers and you don't wanna do layering. Or you want a box bob, very trendy cut that basically has no layers in it, or looks as though it has no layers in it. So therefore you refuse to do any layers. There are so many ways and names for layering hair. And the problem is you might be associating layers with a very specific style of layering or technique of layering or amount of layers in total. It could still look one length, but have layers, and those layers are there simply to add more shape and more movement to the hair so that that one length feel actually looks as good as it can. If your hair is all one length, it almost never functions as well as if there are some layers, because 9 out of 10 people need something to kind of get that shape built into it. All I'm saying is it could literally be the reason that people aren't stopping you on the street and asking you where you got your bob done. Oh, and I was thinking, I'm actually gonna start doing a newsletter so that when I find people like Chris or other amazing stylists around the United States, I can actually share them with you. But I also wanna be able to like answer questions that I get all the time or just share hair tips in general. So yeah, I'll go ahead and throw that actually in the description so you can check it out too. Okay, number 5, and this is a really, really big one, so don't miss this. Bobs have always been in style. Like literally, there's always been some form of a bob that has been on trend. And the reason for that is because they're timeless. It makes conservative outfits look conservative, and it makes edgy outfits look edgy. And that's part of the reason that people love them so much. Also, a large part of the problem. And I'll be the first one to say that this is a problem that I have. I am so guilty of this on so many levels. It is very easy to fall in love with a particular bob, and then especially as the client, you keep this bob and it works. Everybody tells you how great it looks, you love it, it's easy, it always works well, and you never really switch it up. But you don't want to switch it up because you like the length, it works for your face shape, the length works for your texture, it makes sense for your day-to-day life. But what you're missing is the ability to be able to style it in different ways, and that is where you can really unlock the potential of a bob. I saw a lot of this, and I'm sure you've seen this too, that it was either straight bobs, and then it goes into everybody's doing a bunch of wave in their bob, and it's just kind of one or the other. Then there's differences in the actual cut, but as far as the style goes, those are kind of the two default. Then I was sifting through Chris's page and saw a perfect place to get inspiration. If you want a little bit more of a strong bob shape, but you still want a little tiny bit of texture, very light wave right in the front, that's it. Almost not even like having wave, but just a little something to kind of give it a little bit more edge. You're not even really stepping out of your comfort zone, but you're just kind of adding a little bit to the overall style. Absolutely brilliant. And so that is what I would do. Go to people's pages like Chris, and you can see all of the different ways that he cuts it, but also all of the different styles and the different people. And so you can get different ideas as to how you could style your bob, or maybe what bob you should move into. Don't sleep on the fact that that bob can do a lot more than it's probably doing for you right now. And make sure you go check out Chris and tell him that I sent you. Tell him hi, give him some love, man. The dude is absolutely, again, a masterclass. You're welcome. Otherwise, if you like this video, watch this video now, because you're gonna love that too. And I'll see you over there. You might not love that, but I'll be there anyway. Bye.